I invite delegates to take their seats. Thank you very much. Before proceeding further, I would like to give the floor to the Executive Secretary, Ms. Jyoti Mathur-Philip. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, good evening. We have now reached the halfway mark of our fourth session, and it is clear that the work has been progressing very well in the contact groups and subgroups. The goals that we spoke about on the first day of the plenary are very much within our reach, so let's keep the goals in mind. Please also allow me to take this opportunity to remind participants of the code of conduct in place to prevent harassment at UN events. As we knuckle down and work through these next few days, I'm sure you will agree that we must conduct our proceedings in a respectful manner and in the collaborative spirit that has inspired our discussions since the adoption of UNEA Resolution 514. I also want to take a moment to recognize the logistical challenges that we have faced, especially with the Wi-Fi network. It remains our utmost priority, and we are working with the center here to ensure that any issues are corrected as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mathur-Philip. Distinguished delegates, we are convening this plenary meeting this evening for the following reasons. First, we will have reporting back on the progress of our work under Agenda Item 4 on the preparation of an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including the marine environment. Second, I will briefly address the matter on intersessional work under this agenda item. Third, I will update members on my consultations on the establishment of the legal drafting group. Finally, time permitting, we will take several more statements from observers at the end of this plenary meeting. Distinguished delegates, the committee will now resume its consideration of Agenda Item 4. I will now like to give the floor to the co-chairs of both contact groups to provide us with a short report on the progress of their work. I will like to hear the progress of the co-chairs, and I invite you to all of us hear the progress from the co-chairs and the report from Contact Group 2. From Ms. Kate Lynch of Australia and Mr. Oliver Boachi of Ghana. Mr. Oliver, you have the floor from the seat of Australia.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of my co-chair, Ms. Kate Lynch, and myself, I am pleased to provide this brief report back to plenary on the progress achieved thus far in Contact Group 2 and its subgroups. Contact Group 2 convened on Tuesday afternoon for a general discussion on parts 3 to 6 of the revised draft text to pave the way for detailed discussion in the subgroups. Views were invited on different elements of the revised draft text within this group's mandate, including an assessment of the possible way forward towards achieving convergence, including through potential structural changes, possible realignment of the elements and bridging proposals, and an identification of areas of the text that may benefit from technical streamlining. After an initial exchange of views on the elements in parts 3 to 6 on possible streamlining and potential areas of restructuring, the co-chairs were given the mandate to do technical streamlining of the text. In response to a question on the status of the text, the co-chairs clarified that the streamlined text will be co-chairs' document, that is, a work in progress. Subsequently, the co-chairs worked with the co-facilitators of the subgroups. For subgroup 2.1, Mr. Miguel Luis and Ms. Naomi Caricajo, and for subgroup 2.2, Ms. Marine Collignon and Mr. Danny Radia Nasia, to produce a technically streamlined version of parts 3 to 6 of the revised draft text. This technically streamlined text was made available to delegates on the INC-4 website at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, 24th of April. Following this, 7 meetings of the subgroups have been convened over the past 3 days. Subgroup 2.1, which was mandated to address the elements in Part 3 of the revised draft text, focused on a detailed review of Part 3.1 concerning financing mechanisms and resources. Over their 4 sessions, they have successfully discussed 9 paragraphs, that is paragraphs 0 to 8, leaving only 2 paragraphs remaining to complete this section. Due to time constraints, the capacity building session has not yet been addressed. The subgroup has made significant progress across several key areas of the provisions regarding the financial mechanism in the draft text. The subgroup had strong convergence on the view that a strong financial mechanism is needed to address plastic pollution efficiently. The discussions have also converged on the importance of acknowledging the special circumstances of various countries, although there remains some divergence on where this acknowledgement should be placed within the document. The co-facilitators have been given the mandate to further streamline the provisions included in Part 3.1, reflecting the views expressed over the last 2 days to support our ongoing negotiation efforts. I will now hand over to my co-chair, Ms. Kate Lynch, to continue delivering our report.
Thank you, Oliver, and thank you, Chair. Subgroup 2.2, mandated to address the elements in parts 4, 5 and 6 of the revised draft text, met 3 times between Wednesday and today. The subgroup initiated its work with a read-through of all provisions falling under its mandate to get a sense of the issues and guidance on how the text could be further streamlined to assist in textual negotiations. An initial read-through of Part 4 of the revised Zero draft has been completed, and a read-through of Part 5 is ongoing, with a rich discussion on views. The co-facilitators of this subgroup were given the mandate to attempt a further streamlining of the text, which they achieved for national action or implementation plans, implementation and compliance, reporting on progress of implementation, periodic assessment and monitoring of the progress of implementation of the instrument, and effectiveness evaluation. The initial reaction to the streamlined text has been positive in the subgroup and will provide a tool for members to use during their negotiations. In terms of linkages with the work of Contact Group 1, several areas have been flagged, including a request to integrate principles into relevant sections of the instrument, a suggestion to consolidate all mentions of means of implementation in Part 3 of the draft instrument. Chair, during the course of discussions, we've also considered where potential intersessional work could support us to move further towards convergence. These include assessing various options for the financing mechanism, examining its modalities and governance structures, identifying and determining potential sources for resource mobilisation, and exploring how financial support can be most effectively targeted. Drawing lessons from other MEAs, particularly in understanding their financial arrangements and any overlaps that could inform our approach. Some delegations noted that this discussion should be held on the broader landscape of effective resource mobilisation from all sources and means of implementation. For both subgroups, next steps will encompass completion of their respective read-throughs of the text and consideration of further streamlined text produced by the co-facilitators, developed on the basis of the subgroup discussions and uploaded submissions. More time is needed for both subgroups to complete this exercise in order to be in a position to move towards textual negotiations. I'd like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank the members for their spirit of collaboration and their steadfast engagement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to the co-chair of Contact Group 2, Mr. Oliver Boachi and Ms. Kate Lynch, and also my gratitude to the co-facilitators of Contact Group 2. Now, next, we will hear the progress report from the co-chairs of Contact Group 1, Mr. Axel Borgmann of Germany and Ms. Wen Cesar of Palau from the seat of Germany. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of the Contact Group 1 co-chair, Gwen, and myself, I'm pleased to provide this brief report back to Plenary on the progress achieved thus far in Contact Group 1 and its subgroups. Contact Group 1 convened on Tuesday afternoon for a general discussion on parts 1 and 2 of the revised draft text to pave the way for detailed discussions in the subgroups. Views were invited on different elements of the revised draft text within the group mandate, including an assessment of the possible way forward towards achieving convergence and through potential structural changes, possible realignment of the elements and bridging proposals, as well as identification of areas of the text that may benefit from technical streamlining. After initial exchange of views on the elements in parts 1 and 2 on possible streamlining and potential areas for restructuring, the co-chairs were given the mandate to do a technical streamlining of the text in the understanding that the intention was not to remove any position or substance. Subsequently, the co-chairs worked with the co-facilitators of the subgroups to produce a technically streamlined text of parts 1 and 2 of the revised draft text. The different elements of technically streamlined text were subsequently made available to delegates on the INC-4 webpage. In subgroup 1.1, which was mandated to address the elements of part 1 of the revised draft text and part 2, elements 12 and 13 bis, 3 meetings have been held, and the group completed a first read-through of all sections. The co-facilitators reported that they believe they have made important progress over the last 3 days and that the delegates have engaged constructively in helping each other understand key priorities and positions. Many delegations have also submitted written proposals, which the co-facilitators have read and considered in careful detail. The text has also been further consolidated. 3 of the 7 sections have been streamlined through co-facilitators and/or co-chairs' proposed text. These are on objective, scope, and just transition. The scope section has gone from 16 options to 4. However, there is still significant divergence in the group on key issues, including on objective and scope, and no streamlining has yet occurred in 4 of the 7 sections under discussion. There is no agreed text so far. Given the cross-cutting nature of part 1, especially on scope, there are multiple linkages to the work of other groups. The co-facilitators also reported that many delegations have also made it clear that they feel it's premature to discuss the further preamble and definitions before agreeing the more substantive elements of the text. For some documents that have prepared after the discussion in the group is still to come. Now that a first reading is complete, the group looked forward to our guidance on the overall way forward. Based on the discussions so far in the group, different potential approaches could be further explored and subject to the will of members or any other guidance from the contact group. For example, the subgroup could consider focusing on the already streamlined sections to explore further opportunities for convergent and textual negotiations. Subgroup 1.2 met in 2 sessions yesterday and again this morning following a joint session with subgroup 1.3. The subgroup made also very good progress at this early stage. Members discussed the organization of work and the provision within our mandate in a spirit of very constructive dialogue. The subgroup agreed to work on the basis of the technical streamlined co-chairs draft text. For those provisions which the co-chairs in consultation with the co-facilitators decided not to technically streamline at this stage, we worked on the basis of the revised draft text. Document UNEP 3 PP INC-4/3. Yesterday, the group completed an initial walkthrough of Part 2, Provision 5 on product design, composition and performance, Provision 6 on non-plastic substitutes, 4 bis on dedicated programs of work, Provision 1 on primary plastic polymers, and Provision 2 on chemicals and polymers of concern. The co-facilitators reported having heard very useful explanations and rationale for member preferences within the streamlined texts, which provide clear and useful information as we move further discussions of each provisions. In addition, a number of CRPs were introduced on various provisions. While there remain divergent views on the need for specific provisions, we see emerging convergence on how specific provisions could be streamlined for further consideration. Following the joint session on fishing gear, the subgroup reconvened this morning, continuing with provision 3 on problematic avoidable plastic products and intentionally added microplastics. Similar to the discussion on other provisions, many delegations favored clear global obligation and timeframes. Some expressed support for national approaches and others support for no provision on this item. A proposal from a number of countries was introduced and there were calls on intersessional work, especially on criteria. Subgroup 1.2 was supposed to meet tonight, but this is not going to happen due to the delay we had in the previous sessions, and therefore will, at a later stage, continue with provisions for 3 bis on micro and nanoplastics, 4 on exemptions, 10A on trade, including 2 options of provision 10, 13 on transparency, tracking, monitoring, and labeling. Noting the large number of detailed provisions under the mandate of subgroup 1.2, it was suggested that it will be important that sufficient time is allocated to the deliberations of subgroup 1.2. With that, I hand over to my co-chair, Gwen.
Thank you, Axel. For subgroup 1.3, which is mandated to consider in part 2, elements 7, 8, 9A, 10B, and 11, met twice for 3 hours on the 25th and 26th of April. It also held a joint 1-hour session with a subgroup 1.2 on fishing gear, which was convened to address elements within the mandates of both subgroups related to the subject matter. The subgroup issued a technical streamline of text elements within the mandate on April 24th at the end of the day and has now completed a first consideration of elements 11 parts 2.7, 8, 9A, 10B, and 11. The streamlined text was well received, and the co-facilitators reported that there was good engagement on all issues. The group also received a number of constructive suggestions on further opportunities for streamlining, and a number of delegations also announced that they intend to present some elements of text in various areas. On provision 7 on extended producer responsibility, A range of different views were expressed, including on whether a provision on EPR should be included at all, and if so, whether it should be mandated or voluntary. The need for flexibility to account for national circumstances was highlighted by a number of delegations. On Provision 8 on emissions and releases, there was a rich discussion including the different potential sources of emissions and releases to be addressed. References were made also in this context to the importance of considering national circumstances and capabilities. Delegations also called for ensuring alignment and non-duplication with other international organizations and instruments, chiefly the International Maritime Organization. Linkages with other sections, including waste management, as well as parts 3 and 4, were also identified. On 9A, waste management, there was overall support in the room for the streamlined option 1 as a basis for future work. On 10B, many delegations, the importance of environmentally sound management was highlighted, as well as the need to ensure consistency and avoid duplication with the Basel Convention. On 11, the importance of addressing existing plastic pollution was noted, and the disproportionate impact of this issue on some countries was emphasized. The importance of mobilization of resources and linkages with Part 4 were identified in this context. In the joint session for fishing gear, rich and constructive discussions took place, including on the placement and preferred obligations and control measures regarding fishing gears to be considered under the instrument, and there was support for further streamlining of the text in Provision 9B and 8 into a single text without prejudice to its ultimate placement in the instrument. Linkages identified between Parts 8 and Parts 2, 8 and Part 2, 9B on fishing gear led to the organization of a joint session on both texts. Areas mentioned for intersessional work included Provision 7 on EPR, outline of an Annex D on elements of EPR. For Provision 8 was understanding sources of emissions and releases and pathways. Further to this initial consideration of all elements within their mandate, it has been agreed that they will prepare further streamlined text on all elements to facilitate further discussion. It was also agreed jointly with Subgroup 1.2 that the co-facilitators of both groups would jointly prepare a further streamlined text on fishing gear. Having consulted among the 4 co-facilitators and also with the co-chairs of the contact group and the chair of the INC, they proposed that this streamlined text be subsequently discussed in Subgroup 1.3, again without prejudice to its final placement in the instrument. Mr. Chair, we have concluded our second contact group meeting in which we note concerns from members regarding clarity on the mandate of the subgroups, especially in the process of the streamlining efforts and in ensuring that member positions are maintained. We also noted the concerns of making documents available with sufficient time for preparation and the scheduling and timing of parallel meetings that take into account the capacities of small delegations. We will continue to consult with you, Chair, and our co-facilitators to provide a clear and transparent process for our work. We would like to thank all the members for their active and constructive engagement and look forward to continuing our work. We thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wen Cesar and Mr. Axel Borgman, co-chairs of Contact Group 1, and also my gratitude to the co-facilitators of the subgroups of Contact Group 1. My dear colleagues, well, thank you very much for the reports, and I would like to commend to you and all the delegates for the hard work. This update has been very useful as we continue our work in the contact groups for the remainder of this session. Distinguished delegates, let me now briefly turn to the possible intersessional work. As I mentioned during Yes, I can see that United States of America wants to take the floor. Please, the USA, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry, I had pressed my button just before you had moved on to the next item. I just wanted briefly to express our thanks to the co-chairs and the co-facilitators for the work that they have been doing over the last several days. I think we are making steady progress moving forward in the various contact groups and subgroups. We are cognizant that we are now in a position with only 3 days left to complete our efforts. And so I wanted to just revisit something that had come up in the prior plenary session and suggest that moving forward so that we can quicken our pace, because we still have an enormous amount of work to do, that we could convene 3 of the subgroups in parallel should that be needed, Mr. Chair. So just as you move forward, again, express appreciation for everyone in the room who I think is working towards a successful outcome here, but I do think it's critical that we quicken our pace to try to move forward, to really dig into this substance and work through some of these issues here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I thank the United States, and now I give the floor to Norway, followed by Cuba. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And like the previous speaker, I would like to thank you, the co-chairs, and the co-facilitators, as well as all colleagues, for the hard and constructive work that we have done these past days. In line with what the United States just said, we've all traveled far for this meeting. We need to make the most of the time that we have available here, and so Norway too would support that. As we move forward, we should explore the possibility of having three groups running in parallel. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Norway. Now I give the floor to Cuba, followed by India. Cuba, you have the floor.
Muy buenas noches.
And good evening, Chair, and thank you for all the efforts that we made to come to plenary here today. On the proposal presented by the distinguished representative of the United States, we would also be interested in moving forward as much as possible in the 3 remaining days, well, maybe just 2 in the contact groups. Nevertheless, the parallel sessions with 3 groups creates great difficulties for delegations which just have 2 or 1 member. In particular, when there are parallel sessions of 2 subgroups within the same wider group. For example, last night this happened with subgroup 1.1 and subgroup 1.2 within contact group 1. Therefore, we really would hope that you take this into account. Please don't hold subgroup sessions in parallel which belong to the same contact group. We want to ensure that all parties, all members, can take part in a just manner in our deliberations. And this to ensure that we don't remain stuck when certain discussions. We don't want to come back on any discussions held or any progress that was made because of that. Thank you. I thank you, Cuba. And I now
Floor to India, followed by Switzerland. India, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. During the first 4 days of INC-4, delegations have engaged with constructive spirit. We have made progress towards having the streamlined text. We thank for the efforts made by co-chairs and co-facilitators as well as the member states. The Indian delegation is of the view that we should first focus on low-hanging fruits, particularly those aspects of the revised draft where convergence is emerging. This will help us meeting the milestones at the conclusion of INC-4. India is also of the view that INC Secretariat may consider to establish a mechanism to take forward intersessional work after INC-4. Topics may be means of implementation, especially dedicated financial mechanism for the substantive provisions, assessment of requirement of resources in respect of important provisions. Moving forward, India would like to reiterate its commitment to the principles of consensus in decision-making process on the substantive issues. Further, India looks forward to making the best use of remaining time in Ottawa to continue deliberations in transparent and inclusive manner, ensuring everyone's voice is heard. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished delegate of India, and I give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Ghana. Please, Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also like to thank, first of all, the co-facilitators and co-chairs for their hard work and the colleagues for the constructive collaboration over the last days. I think we have really shown that we are all willing to move forward in an inclusive way and listen to each other. We know the time is short, the workload is a lot. In this regard, we support the statements made by the United States and by Norway, and we support to try to work with 3 groups in the same time in parallel, as was outlined in the scenario note. Thank you.
Thank you to Switzerland. Now I give the floor to Ghana, followed by China. Ghana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity. I make this submission on behalf of the Africa Group. Your Excellency and esteemed colleagues, the Africa Group wishes to reiterate to the Chair our request to avoid late-night meetings during INC-4. Tired minds do not effectively negotiate. This request was duly communicated to you, Mr. Chair, when the Africa Group invited you to participate in our regional consultation meeting. The request was again communicated to the Bureau by our Bureau members. However, we noted with concern that yesterday's session traveled into midnight. Such midnight meetings put a toll on the group because we have small delegations. As a result, we again raised the issue in the meeting of Contact Group 1 today. We kindly request that meetings do not end later than 10 p.m. during this INC-4 session. This request will allow us to effectively work together to achieve the treaty's goal to end plastic pollution. We thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much to Ghana. Now I give the floor to China. Please, you have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. We're getting into midnight zone again, so I'll try to be brief. As the co-chairman has briefed in the past few days, under the leadership of Louis, under the co-facilitators.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem with the interpretation.
Okay, I will try with
just
English.
Just a few minutes or few seconds to see what's happening. Thank you.
I will do it in English. Is that fine?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I will try my best. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. As been reported by the co-chairs and over the past few days, under your leadership and also the great help from the co-chairs and the co-facilitators, the delegations made their utmost efforts, and we have achieved great progress. I would say that all the delegations, each member countries, no matter whether they're big or small, they have tried their utmost, overcoming the difficulties of jet lags, working overnights, which I highly appreciate. The goal of all these efforts is trying to speed up the process. This is clear. We are all share the same goal to try to reach the consensus to conclude the legally binding instruments by the end of this year. That's our common goal. However, in China, we have a historic saying that is, 欲速则不达. Haste does not bring success. For these legally binding instruments, we are going to making our serious commitments. We need to be fully involved at the very beginning. As been stated by the African colleagues, they are very much tried hard, but they have real difficulties. China also has the difficulties. I wouldn't explain it again because I said it already in the contact groups. We hope we could follow the rules, which has already been agreed before we came here to Ottawa. We should not have more than 3 parallel groups, among which one is on leak control measures, the other one is on the means of implementation. If it is needed, we can have the third one, but that is for informal consultation. This is the rule that has been agreed by the head of the delegations meeting and confirmed by the chairs and also the secretariat. So if at the very beginning we broke the rule, if we are going to break the rules, I don't know how long we can go together. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank you very much to distinguished delegate from China. And now I give the floor to European Union. European Union, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The European Union and its member states would also like to commend the co-chairs and the co-facilitators for the great work that they did, and also thank colleagues from other delegations for their commitment to moving our work forward. As others have pointed out, we have an enormous task ahead of us. We are united in the ambition to bring this negotiation across the finish line by the end of this year. This actually means that we need to make efforts to work as much, as fast, and as intensive as possible. Therefore, we would like to support to maintaining the arrangements that we have agreed at the beginning of our meeting, i.e. that we can have 3 meetings of subgroups in parallel. We also think that, as unpleasant this may be, we will have to work late hours and all nights if we actually can move our work forward, and therefore we support the proposals by other delegations to maintain the original arrangements and to include all-night sessions in our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the EU. Now I'd like to give the floor to Pakistan, followed by Saudi Arabia. Pakistan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I would like to first of all congratulate the co-chairs for the work they have done so far. And I would like to also echo what my colleagues from China have already said. You see, for small delegations like us, it's quite impossible to follow the contact groups with any sort of harmony. And as you know, Mr. Chair, that this process is a consensus-based process, and even the organizers aspire to say that it's an all-inclusive process. But what happens with small delegations is that when they're not being able to follow some of the proceedings of this session, it means that the session is not inclusive, and thereby it leads to a lack of trust in the process by some of the parties. So I'll join my voice with some other delegations which are having problems with this process, and would like to request your chair for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Pakistan. Now I'd like to give the floor to Saudi Arabia, followed by United Kingdom. Saudi Arabia, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and we would like to congratulate you on this progress. It seems to be there is an additional spirit, not only a Nairobi spirit, but also we have an Ottawa spirit. We have made a great progress in those few days, and we are committed in constructive streamlining of the text. I share the same view that my distinguished colleagues before me highlighted, like China, Cuba, and African group, that for a small delegation, it would be very difficult to have a multiple contact group at the same time. What we decided here is to streamline the text as an objective, and we feel if we leave people behind, even if there is some groups that can work on the text, but we have others that cannot be represented, still we will have a text that does not reflect the other views, then we'll go back again and look into it. So we don't find it's a constructive forward. Yes, you might have a little bit of a streamlining, but still other views, they will have the right to go back again and look into it. We don't want to leave someone behind, and that is the spirit of negotiation. We cannot have a treaty that leaves someone behind. We have to set our base to work with everyone to reach the same destination. Thank you, Chair.
I thank you, distinguished delegate from Saudi Arabia. Now I'd like to give the floor to United Kingdom, followed by Australia. The UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank the co-chairs and the co-facilitators for their hard work, and we're also grateful to our colleagues for the good work in the contact groups and subgroups this week. We have a big task ahead of us and not much time to complete it. We knew coming into this week that we'd have to work hard, and we need to make the most of the time that we have here. For that reason, the UK would support the proposal that we allow for 3 contact groups or subgroups to meet at the same time, as set out in the scenario note. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the distinguished delegate from UK. Now I'd like to give the floor to Australia, followed by Canada. Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Australia would like to acknowledge the work of the co-facilitators and co-chairs, their inclusive approach, and we thank them for their efforts. Australia takes the floor to join the calls from the US, Norway, Switzerland, EU and the United Kingdom, and to reiterate that at the end of this session, this committee will only have 1 session left to complete its work towards an internationally legally binding instrument by the end of 2024. That is what is set in our UNEA mandate. It is essential we give ourselves the best chance to make progress this week. As such, and as I said, we join with the other delegations to call for the operation of 3 parallel subgroups to give us that best chance. That is also consistent with your scenario note, Chair. We thank you.
Thank you very much to Australia. Now I give the floor to Canada, followed by the Russian Federation. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And let me first start by thanking the co-chairs and the co-facilitators for all their hard work. In line with the information included in the scenario note and expressed during the head of delegation meetings, Canada, like Norway, US, Switzerland, EU, UK, Australia, would also support the work of the 3 subgroups in parallel, as we only have 3 days left here in Ottawa to set the path towards INC-5. And despite the progress, we still have much work to do. Thank you.
Thank you to Canada. Now I'd like to give the floor to the Russian Federation, followed by Kazakhstan. Russian Federation, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Few points that our delegation would like to raise. The first one is technical. Will it be possible to have the co-facilitators' reports published in writing? The second point is substantial on the organization of work. We share the same concerns that were aired by our colleagues from China, Ghana, Cuba, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. We do understand the concerns of most of the delegations in this room for the need for progress. However, we cannot sacrifice the quality of our work for the sake of speed. We have agreed in the very beginning that no more than 2 subgroups would run in parallel on substantial matters. And it is our firm belief we should stick to that plan. Thirdly, the co-facilitators of the contact group 1 have reported on the challenges of the streamlining process. And we would like just to emphasize that, yes, there is an issue Specifically, the issue of the transparency of the streamlining process was raised for the subgroup 1.1, and we will wait for the feedback from the co-facilitators on how they are going to resolve that issue, because without resolving, we cannot move forward the way it is. It was also proposed by the co-facilitators of the contact group 1 that, as a way forward, we could introduce the procedure of validating of the text. We also take note of that, and we will wait for the feedback on how it is going to be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you to distinguished delegate from the Russian Federation. Now I give the floor to Kazakhstan, followed by New Zealand. Kazakhstan, you have the floor.
Distinguished Chair, thank you so much for having afforded us the floor. Well, truth be told, we would like to start by conveying our gratitude to the participants for the work that has been carried out, as well as to the co-chairs for having coordinated this work. We back those states who voiced their position against having parallel discussions, in other words, not more than 2 parallel groups at the same time. This is linked both to the fact that a number of delegations are small ones, and also with the challenges regarding the need to review the text by non-English speaking countries. It is very important that all orally and written positions be taken into account in drafting the provisions of this draft agreement. We'd also ask you to look at the possibility of having additional discussions between INC-4 and INC-5 with an objective of preparing high-quality documents. And if a number of positions are not discussed this time. Thank you.
Thank you to this distinguished delegate from Kazakhstan. Now I give the floor to New Zealand. New Zealand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And we join others in thanking the co-chairs and co-facilitators for their hard work in getting us this far. New Zealand shares the concerns expressed by others on the limited time available to us here in Ottawa. We join the United States, Norway, Switzerland, the EU, United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada in urging the consideration of 3 groups running in parallel. If this is not possible, then we share the EU's views that we need to give consideration to working longer hours if we are truly serious about making enough progress here at INC-4 in order to conclude our important work by the end of this year. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from New Zealand. Now I'd like to give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Gabon. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me also join others in congratulating the co-chairs and the co-facilitator for the hard work they have done over the past 3 days. Mr. Chair, we are all here to work, but we should also remember that the International Labour Organization has a limit for working hours per day to promote higher productivity while safeguarding workers' physical and mental health. As we are working under the UN system, it will be wrong for us to disregard its standard on working hours, with meetings going very late into the early hours of the next day. In this regard, Nigeria would like to support the proposal as highlighted by Ghana on behalf of the African region that meetings should not exceed 10 p.m. on a daily basis. Mr. Chair, we know that we have enormous work with us, and that is why we have agreed on a program of work. But unfortunately, on the first day, while we should have saved a lot of time, after regions have given their statement, you allow national statements. The time will be conserved for more work. So we cannot say because we have limited time, we should not safeguard our own health. So we are appealing to you that meetings should not go beyond 10, and we should also stick to our initial arrangement of not having more than 2 working groups working in parallel. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Nigeria. Now I give the floor to Gabon, followed by Brazil. Gabon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We want to commend the work done by all the colleagues and especially the co-chairs and the co-facilitators. We appreciate the work and the progress made so far, but are really aware of the important remaining work. We are here to work and make progress, and that is our absolute priority. Nevertheless, we don't know how we can progress in an inclusive mood if some parties are simply left behind due to the limited delegation they have here. I just recall that some delegations only have 1 or 2 delegates, while others have more than 25 delegates, and the list of participants have been shared to all of us. We are open to any additional work during the intersession that can help us moving forward, but we will not be able to support parallel meetings during that session when we will not be able to attend and frankly participate to those sessions. So, Mr. Chair, we are in your hands and fully trust your leadership in guiding us in a process where all parties can constructively contribute to the work. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Gabon. Now I give the floor to Brazil, followed by Cook Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good evening. We are really in a discussion where it's clear to see the dividing lines between developed and developing countries. The general rule in multilateral meetings to have 2 meetings in parallel is actually based on the needs of developing countries, and they're speaking about this tonight. And also the financing that is offered to them that actually allows for only 2 delegates to be present in one multilateral meeting. That's why this rule exists. Our region, GRULAC, has expressed flexibility on the idea of organizing 3 meetings in parallel, but only on an exceptional basis. We cannot have 3 meetings morning, afternoon, and evening, and regional meetings, and other meetings we have to attend to. By the way, my delegation would like to support the statement by the African group on evening sessions. We really all need to rest to be prepared, not only to defend our positions, but to have ideas and creative ideas to contribute to this process. Our delegation is committed to progress to advance our work. We have co-organized informal exercises on issues, tried hard, as many of you might remember, for an intersessional work mandate in INC-3, which would have extended time for us to work more on the issues that we're considering here. We want to approve an intersessional work mandate, and our delegation is trying to contribute to the debates by co-facilitating one of the subgroups. Also, and I really have to add this, our delegation resents that working exhaustive hours and dividing yourself in different meetings is the test to show that you're serious or seriously committed to our work. For bigger delegations, showing the seriousness or commitment is much easier. It's like asking 2 people to run a certain distance in a certain time, but to one person you give a car and the other has to do it by running. For bigger delegations, you can rotate your delegates. But for smaller developing countries, smaller delegations running this marathon is actually showing a lot of very serious commitment to the treaty. And we should commend the efforts of these countries. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Brazil. Now I'd like to give the floor to Cook Islands, followed by Kuwait. The Cook Islands, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to add our voice to those delegations recognizing the importance for steady progress and the need for flexibility. The Cook Islands, Fiji, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and Niue are amongst the smallest delegations at INC-4. However, despite this challenge, we remain committed to achieving steady progress. We are therefore in support of the proposal to convene parallel sessions in the spirit of achieving this progress that will also help in better shaping the intersessional work. We do not wish to leave Ottawa without a clear way forward for INC-5, as time is not on our side. As big ocean states, we rely on our blue moana for our very existence, and a healthy, thriving ocean means healthy, thriving nations. Unfortunately, The plastic crisis keeps scaling day by day, and we hope the rest of the members share the same sense of urgency. We remain guided by you and your team, Chair. Meta Kimata.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Cook Islands. Now I'd like to give the floor to Kuwait, followed by Iraq. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to thank you and the co-chairs, co-facilitators for their diligent effort to get to this point of progress. However, we'd like to bring to your attention, Kuwait also have a limitation in terms of resources to attend parallel sessions. However, we're committed to stay as late as the sessions take, but no parallel sessions. So in that case, we associate our voice with the statement made by our colleagues from China, Cuba, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Russia, India, and all other delegates share the same concern. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Kuwait. Now I'd like to give the floor to Iraq, followed by Argentina. Iraq, you have the floor.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
I'm going to speak in Arabic. The delegation of Kuwait would like to pay tribute to the efforts, substantial efforts, which you have undertaken, which have been undertaken by the Secretariat and the contact groups, as well as your office, generally speaking. And of course, by the heads, i.e. the co-facilitators and co-chairs. We'd like to thank you for all of your work. It seems to me, sir, that we have referred to this in the past. And we didn't hear what your views were regarding how to undertake and carry out the meetings, the remaining meetings over the last 3 days. For this reason, sir, I would like to turn to you and ask you, what is your vision for our future work? If you could do this before we listen to all of the other delegations, this might stand to be useful. I believe that the results of this meeting are of critical importance for us to achieve a worthy result in terms of combating plastic waste. And it will be a collective success. Cooperation, flexibility, efforts are all being made to achieve this collective success. The delegation of my country shares the views voiced by a number of delegations regarding their concerns about participating, about being present in more than 2 contact groups or subgroups at the same time. And even if this means that we have to work late into the night, which of course is very tiring to most delegations, but if there is a need to do so, we for one will be there. Iraq would also like to see further discussion and negotiations regarding the texts in a more direct fashion, something that could lead us to coming up with an initial draft for this instrument towards the end of this negotiation cycle. Thank you so much, sir.
I thank you very much to the distinguished delegate from Iraq, and I will come back to you. I can see a number of delegations asking for the floor. So I will come back to you. I would like to, and I can see, how the different concerns, the different views are being presented. I would like to hear a few more delegations, and then I will ask you, please, if we can sum up also to get my views, my response. But I'd like to give the floor now to Argentina, followed by Japan.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. Our team would just like to add that we also understand that there's little time available to us and that a lot remains to be done in order to fulfill the mandate set out by UNEP Resolution 514. So we support your ambition. Within GRULAC, we agree that we should have certain flexibility and agree that we can have parallel meetings on an exceptional basis, but not as the rule. Therefore, we think it would be very damaging for small delegations because they could be left behind during this process. So we don't think we should have 3 meetings at the same time as a rule, and therefore we don't support it. Thank you.
Very much. Muchas gracias al representante de Argentina.
Thank the representative of Argentina.
Now I give the floor to the representative to Japan, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I sympathize very much with small delegations, but considering the progress we have made so far during the INC-4 and the limited time that we have left before concluding the meeting, I would like to echo others who support having 3 parallel sessions. I'm not suggesting that we should have it as a rule to have 3 parallel sessions, but on the basis of necessity. At the same time, I would like to request the Secretariat to notify us in some way or another of the changes made during the day on the meeting schedule. It is difficult for us to keep refreshing the INC website all the time to see if the changes are made or not. I would suggest that the Secretariat could inform us of the changes in schedule at the end of, for example, previous meetings during the day, so that we could prepare ourselves well in advance. Thank you.
I thank the representative from Japan. Now I'd like to give the floor to Chile. Please, Chile tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chair. Chile is a small delegation, just as many others here in these discussions. Nevertheless, we are committed to moving the process forwards, and in this regard, we are ready to work on an exceptional basis in 3 parallel groups when strictly necessary. We are addressing an urgent global issue, therefore we need special efforts from all delegations. We agree in that mentioned by a delegation of Japan in the sense that we need to have information in advance to better prepare for all sessions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Muchísimas gracias.
I thank the delegation of Chile and now give the floor to Guatemala, followed by Kenya.
The floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chair. Guatemala aligns itself with a statement made by Argentina and others. We recognise the importance of moving forwards in our negotiations in order to fulfil the mandate of Resolution 514. Nevertheless, it's not possible to have the same level of accessibility as other larger delegations. Having 3 contact groups at the same time is very difficult for us. Therefore, just as other countries in GRULAC, we support the African group proposal in terms of the contact group work. Thank you.
Gracias.
I thank Guatemala.
Now I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Uganda. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for convening this second plenary meeting to review the state of negotiations. Kenya aligns this statement to the African group statement delivered by the distinguished representative of Ghana. Kenya believes the negotiations have covered considerable grounds and that appetite is growing for tangible outcomes from this session. We therefore appreciate the efforts the co-facilitators, the contact group chairs, and the subgroup leads have made in moving the process forward. We assure you of our continued full support. On the process, Kenya supports the statement by Ghana, which has been echoed by other delegations concerning the parallel meetings which are working to the disadvantage of the smaller delegations. We urge you, Chair, to come up with innovative ways that ensure openness, inclusivity, and effective participation of all delegates. We thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to the representative of Kenya. Now I give the floor to Uganda, followed by Senegal. Please, Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Republic of Uganda would like to congratulate you, Chair, and all the contact group chairs and subgroup co-facilitators for the efforts in steering these negotiations so far. We, however, would like to align ourselves with the statement made by Ghana on behalf of Africa region and several other delegations concerning the program of work that seek to promote decision-making through exhaustion. Whereas this approach may seem like a shortcut to progress, we run a risk of retarding efforts made as the outcome will not be embraced and our time will ultimately go to waste, Mr. Chairman. As such, our delegation joins the rest of the delegations to confirm that we cannot support 3 parallel groups as this would jeopardize the outcome of the process. This was the plenary agreement and we are not willing to accept anything different, Mr. Chairman. We are further concerned that holding meetings too late in the night constrains the small delegations where you may find one person having to sit in negotiations from morning up to another morning. We believe that this way of doing things will jeopardize the speed of progress as things from this hastened process will ultimately be challenged in subsequent processes, thereby wasting more time. Our firm view is that we must not have more than 2 subgroups running at the same time, and we propose that all subgroups should not go beyond 10. We further would like to urge the Secretariat to exercise a little bit of more transparency in the way the statements submitted on the platform are being uploaded. We believe that there is room for improvement regarding how the priority of uploading statements is being done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much to Uganda. I still have a number of delegations asking for the floor. I would like to give the floor to a couple more delegations and then also present my views to you. But yes, I have listening. I am hearing, repeating the same different concerns, but a couple of more delegations and I will present to you my views. So now I give the floor to Senegal, followed by Dominican Republic.
Merci. Thank you, Chair. Senegal aligns itself with the statement made by the African group and all other countries that have asked for respect for the scenario notes that you distributed yourself. Nigeria already indicated at the opening ceremony that we would agree to not provide national statements. And also, we're not in 2 blocks, with one block saying we agree and one saying we don't agree. If we're not following the scenario note, then it's very difficult. We will leave the room and we won't negotiate. It's not a question of agreeing or not. We need to be respectful of our respective capacities as far as possible. We've often raised these issues within the Bureau. And there's even lack of credibility within groups because the agenda changes so much throughout the day. Then, on intersessional work, this was begun to move forward as a process with as many meetings as possible to move it forwards. Why then do we have more than 2 parallel meetings and work very late? As we said in the African group, we don't want to have more than 2 parallel groups. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative from Senegal. Now, ahora le doy la palabra.
I now give the floor to the Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. And good evening, everybody. We would like to thank the co-facilitators of the groups and subgroups for their work and support the Proposal Bureau to continue our work. We know that it's a challenge to have 3 parallel meetings, in particular for small delegations, but therefore we deeply thank all delegations for expressing their concern for small delegations such as the Dominican Republic. Nevertheless, we recognize that time is scarce, and therefore we should show flexibility and work exceptionally in order to make as much progress as possible during the few remaining days. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Dominican Republic.
Si me permiten un minuto.
If you'll allow me just 1 minute, please. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, I appreciate very much your comments, your questions too, and also I appreciate the toll that a long week of negotiations can add for us all. But I'm also mindful that we have been charged with a great responsibility to negotiate on behalf of our member states and of our communities. If we count the days from tomorrow that we will have between in INC-4 and INC-5, there will be remaining only 10 days of negotiations. But I appreciate very much your support and efforts to make the most time together. In our subgroup arrangements, I will also remind all delegates that subgroups will report back to contact groups to allow an opportunity for all delegates to follow progress through the contact group meetings. I have said it before, that when we move to textual negotiations, we will not have more than 2 meetings in parallel. But we might wish to consider to maximize and optimize our time, and also to have an extra, when necessary, an extra or a third meeting in parallel. Colleagues, I'm incredibly grateful for your efforts to date and for your constructive suggestions. However, I'm concerned about the limited time remaining for our work, and I hear many calls for us to make the most of our time here in Ottawa. To balance these different perspectives, may I suggest the following. When we aim to have the majority of our remaining sessions be only 2 meetings in parallel, but also remain with flexibility open to scheduling 1 extra session until we advance to textual negotiations, to ensure that we can achieve good progress in these meetings. We need to make progress. Therefore, we will continue as planned. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I would like to advance to to present to you my views on intersessional work and also about the legal drafting group. And also we have to consider that our time is limited here in plenary with interpretation. So I would like to give you my views on intersessional work. I acknowledge that we still have some delegations asking for the floor, but I will ask your flexibility to continue with our work here in plenary on intersessional work and on the legal drafting group. I can see the Iran, Rwanda, and Nigeria, they're still asking for the floor. Iran, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's very late, and I'm sure that many of my colleagues in my team and also other delegations are very tired, and they do not, want to listen to very lengthy discussions. And we also prefer, to utilize the remaining time for the purpose of our negotiations in the proper manner. Mr. Chairman, the important issue which we should look at is the trust. Trust between countries and the Secretariat, trust between countries and the chairmanship, and trust between all member states to work together. If this trust is broken, then we will lose a big winning card, because then we will not have confidence in what we hear, from our partners. So this is the most important issue which we should have in mind for our future work. So we would appreciate for what we hear from you and for what we hear from our colleagues in the room, we focus on this important issue. The second is about how we want, to proceed. We believe that we have not been able to utilize our time in a proper manner. We lost 2 days because, there was some logistical supports. We were moving among the rooms and nobody was responsive. We didn't have access, to internet. For downloading the smallest documents for 2 days, we should just move, in the lobbies here to find a way. Nobody look at these logistical, problems. We do appreciate, what has been done by the host country. We do appreciate what has been done by the Secretariat, but we cannot ignore this. We lost 2 days. Even for now, we do not have, speedy access to the revised text. Sometimes we should wait a lot to get this text and to understand that what's going on. This is not, the result of our actions. These needs need to be looked at very carefully if we want to utilize the remaining time in an efficient manner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much to Iran. Now I give the floor to Rwanda, followed by Nigeria. Rwanda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to thank you and the co-facilitators for your hard work to progress us to this point. We have seen productive discussions and continued streamlining of the text. We hope this collective and collaborative spirit continues. Despite this, we still have too much to do. In this regard, Rwanda also supports the Chair's proposal to have 2 subgroups in parallel, with the flexibility of having a 3rd group during reasonable hours. While we understand the challenge this possesses for small delegations like mine, I encourage member states to be creative to ensure that our views are shared in all subgroups. This is the spirit of ambition. I hope we can draw on to move far and faster together. The lack of intersessional work to date means we must make the most out of our time together here in Ottawa and finish the marathon together in INC-4. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative from Rwanda. Now I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Peru. I can see also one more delegation has asked for the floor. I will ask for your indulgence too. I will come back to you and also with some comments and views with these comments raised by different delegations now. Please, it was Nigeria, followed by Peru. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, Mr. Chair, I wanted to ask for clarification on your way forward. And because you just say we proceed as planned, but from what I've heard from Rwanda, it's as, I want to believe that we are sticking to 2 parallel, meetings at a time. Thank you.
Thank you to Nigeria. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Peru. Peru, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to thank you for the work carried out in helping us to move forward in our contact groups. Thank you and your team for your leadership. We have full trust in the ruling that you made a few minutes ago that will enable us to have 2 parallel sessions and exceptionally 1 extra session. We are also a small delegation, but we are ready to work because we know that these are exceptional circumstances. We don't have any issue with working late either, if necessary. We trust fully in your leadership. In our experience, I think we've seen before that topics such as the schedule of meetings are decided by the committee, and it comes under the mandate of the chair and the secretariat, so we respect and support your decision. We'd like to move on to the second part of streamlining and hear the different positions and propose solutions in order to move forward in the remaining work. Thank you. Thank you to the distinguished delegation of Peru.
Now the last interventions from the floor, and I thank you very much also for your comments and questions. I recognize also the logistic problems that we have faced these days. We've been working, and the Secretariat has been working very hard and also fixing those logistic problems. I will give the floor also to the Secretariat to, to talk about those aspects, but I can tell you that we are aware of that. We've been also quite concerned of those, that situation that has been fixed. Once again, what I have mentioned, and it has been mentioned also before, is that yes, we will have and we can have 2 meetings in parallel, and then asking for your flexibility when it will be necessary also, and I will use the word that it was used by my colleague from Peru, exceptionally also a 3rd meeting. I think it's important that we could consider that possibility when it will be required. So believe me, I will work with what I have said before, with 2 meetings in parallel, and when it will be necessary, required, asking for your flexibility to have a 3rd meeting. And when we get to the stage of textual negotiations, yes, it will be guaranteed that we will have only 2 meetings in parallel. Once again, to remind you that the discussions in the subgroups, our debates and negotiations in the subgroups goes back with the report to the contact groups, where all delegations, all member states, all delegates have also an opportunity to listen and to work with what it has been discussed and debate in the subgroups. So that will be my proposal, that will be my desire to advance in our work. I thank very much also the last interventions that has come also from delegations that I can see with limited number of delegates to cover our negotiations. And I thank also for their flexibility. Having said this, I can see the delegation from Brazil asking for the floor. Please, Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for giving us the floor again. Just for clarification, we already stated our position, which is basically the position by my region. When you say exceptional, which actually echoes the position by Grulak, I understand that this means that exceptional does not mean having 3 meetings, morning, afternoon, and evening, because this wouldn't sound exceptional to me. So this would only happen sometimes. And I also think we have to be mindful that textual negotiations will start in different times considering each subgroup. Some subgroups will engage on that earlier than others. So this would have to be taken into account as well. So maybe very soon, we're going to have groups already engaging on textual negotiations. So this is one remark, and the first comment that I made was actually a question. Exceptional does not mean morning, afternoon, and evening. Is that correct? Thank you.
Thank you very much to Brazil. Yes, exceptional does not mean permanent, so it will be when it's required, and with flexibility asking also from the member states. And about textual negotiation, again, if one of the groups meeting in the time it's with textual negotiations, we will respect no more than 2 meetings in parallel. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to go to our second part, or third part, I believe, about intersessional work. And let me briefly you about this possible intersessional work. And as I mentioned during our second plenary meeting on Tuesday afternoon, undertaking further consultations with members, including on the development of proposed modalities and content for intersessional work to be carried out between the 4th and 5th sessions of the committee. In these consultations, particularly taking into account the discussions and progress of intersessional work at the 3rd session. The inputs during my informal consultation in the intersessional period leading up to the 4th session and during this session, leading to this 4th session, also I'm considering as a source for my proposals that I will present to you in a later stage on intersessional work. I'm also closely coordinating with the contact group co-chairs and subgroup co-facilitators who will bring to my attention specific issues related to intersessional work as they arise from their meetings. About this, I will keep members informed on the progress of my consultations. Distinguished delegates, let me now turn to the matter of the legal drafting group. As highlighted in the scenario note contained in document UNEP/PPINC.4/4 that was made available ahead of this session, and as I mentioned previously, I had proposed that the committee establishes at this session a legal drafting group. This group will conduct a legal review of any elements of the draft text forward to it by the plenary of the committee, with a view to ensuring that the text is reflected in a legally sound manner and make recommendations on language to the plenary for its consideration. In its work, the legal drafting group will not consider policy issues, and any policy issues it might identify in the course of its work will be referred back to the plenary of the committee. Further to my consultations, I wish to inform the committee that I intend to propose that it establishes an open-ended legal drafting group on Monday, 29 April. The committee will also appoint 2 co-chairs of the legal drafting group at this session. The open-ended legal drafting group, which will commence its work at the 5th session at INC-5, will be composed of legal experts designated by members. Any member who wishes to do so will be able to designate one legal expert by communicating this information in written to the Secretariat by the 1st of August 2024. The Secretariat will make available on the INC website the compiled list of designated legal experts expected to participate in the group during the 5th session. The meetings of this group will be convened by the co-chairs during the 5th session when required. Given the nature of this group, participation of its meetings will be limited to members only. As I noted earlier, the plenary will take up the establishment of the legal drafting group during its meeting on Monday, 29 April. I can see, veo que Uruguay está pidiendo la palabra. Por favor, Uruguay tiene la palabra.
Uruguay, you have the floor.
I will deliver this statement on behalf of GRULAC. The GRULAC countries would like to thank you for this initiative and to express its general support to the Chair's proposal regarding the establishment of a legal drafting group. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Uruguay.
Distinguished delegates, I will now open the floor for statements from observers, starting with intergovernmental organizations, followed by the UN system entities, and followed by non-governmental organizations. Please, we don't have too much time, so please limit your statements to 2 minutes and keep your interventions short and focused on the revised draft text. As mentioned previously, I will prioritize those speaking for alliances, coalitions, and groups. I can see Switzerland. Before we give to observers the floor, Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I would like to come back to the organization of work. Just at the outset, let me reiterate that we really support an inclusive and transparent process, and we also very support a process where that enables us to achieve our objective to finalize negotiation by INC-4. I have taken note on the way forward till we end the textual negotiations. However, after, the next step is not totally clear to me. And for me, it will be the question regarding the heavy workload that we are having ahead of us, how this way forward, if that really will enable us to achieve the objective. Mr. Chair, I would also suggest to you that you take back this question further to the Bureau for discussions in the Bureau tomorrow morning to reflect how can we tackle the textual negotiations in a way that ensures inclusiveness and transparent, but also enables us to tackle the workload in a successful manner. Thank you.
I thank to distinguished delegate from Switzerland. Yes, I take your statement, and I will raise also these aspects in our Bureau meetings. Thank you. Now, I would like to go back to the observers and okay, now I'd like to give the floor to the UN Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. Please, sir, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair.
The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Toxics and Human Rights. It is encouraging to see the pace of progress picking up in this session. At the same time, it is concerning to see insufficient attention of explicit human rights language in the discussions. And this is concerning because human rights are the key to a legitimate, equitable, and effective legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. This is certainly true in regards to human rights references in the preamble. These can inspire and properly frame the vision of the instrument. And it is also true in operative elements of the instrument. For example, in respect of the objective and the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, or in respect of transparency and access to information, such as in relation to volumes of production to achieve actual reductions, or chemicals of concern, so that hazardous substances can be controlled and eliminated. It is also relevant for just transition, so that the right to a healthy work environment can be realized. Last but not least, I wish to underscore the right to development, which is the basis for meaningful public participation in public plastics policy, and also for means of implementation to achieve international solidarity. To conclude, Mr. President, a human rights-based approach ensures that solutions to the global plastic crisis do not come at the expense of the most vulnerable in society. I therefore take the opportunity to encourage the members to more forcefully reflect human rights in their continuing discussions. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the UN Special Rapporteur on toxics and human rights. Now I'd like to give the floor to the International Alliance of Waste Pickers, and that will be mic 67.
Soy Soledad Mella de la Alianza.
I am from the International Alliance of Waste Pickers. I represent nearly 500,000 waste pickers in more than 30 countries throughout the world. We would like to thank all the member states who advocated for the inclusion of a just translation and for waste pickers to be included in the draft text. I would like to especially mention the African group, GRULAC, Asia Pacific Group, the European Union, and the High Ambition Coalition. And also like to thank, apologies, and I would also like to thank other individual member states. It's essential that Section 7 on extended producer responsibility and Section 9 on waste management take into account the need for a just transition for waste pickers. And we welcome the statements made by member states who have highlighted this, and those statements which made reference to a just transition in the preamble and the objectives of the treaty. On item 12, we are very satisfied to see the almost unanimous support for a strong provision on a just transition. We thank member states who strive to reincorporate the reference to waste pickers and other affected groups such as indigenous peoples in the first paragraph. We would like to highlight that subpoints A and G should be included since they contain essential elements on the just transition. The provisions on just transition in the treaty on plastics will impact more than 20 million waste pickers throughout the world. The real number might even be higher since climate change, conflicts, and increases in inequality will lead to many more to survive by picking through waste. We are on the front lines. We ensure that millions of tons of waste don't go into the environment. For a just transition, we ask for more than just social justice, environmental justice. We need protection for our rights and the rights of indigenous peoples.
We want this just transition to leave no one behind, protecting Indigenous peoples, their territories, and providing space for their knowledge. We thank civil society for their support to waste pickers as well. Thank you.
Agradezco a la Alianza.
I thank the International Alliance of Waste Pickers.
Give the floor to IPEN, and that will be mic 70. Please, IPEN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and good evening to all. My name is Pamela Miller, and I serve as co-chair of IPEN, a network of more than 600 civil society organizations from over 120 countries. Without curbing plastic production, it will be impossible to end plastic pollution. We thank Rwanda and Peru for their proposal on primary plastic polymers. Scientific evidence underscores the undeniable truth. Plastics are chemicals posing significant threats to our environment and health. Current MEAs do not have the mandate to address this, and today, less than 1% of plastic chemicals are regulated internationally throughout their full life cycle. Failing to eliminate hazardous plastic chemicals under this treaty would be a grave oversight, undermining our efforts to combat this global challenge comprehensively. IPEN supports the leadership of countries presenting proposals on chemicals, including the EU, Norway, Cook Islands, and Rwanda, and we encourage the INC to further advance these approaches in the coming days and to develop the criteria during the intersessional period prior to INC-4. The Plastics Treaty must prevent harm to human health and the environment and protect human rights through all stages of the toxic plastic cycle. Your decisions here will affect our future generations. We thank you for your consideration and look forward to working with you.
I thank IPEN. Now I give the floor to the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, and it is microphone mic 58.
My name is Rafael Eudes. On behalf of Aliança Resíduo Zero Brasil and Gaia, Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, I thank all the distinguished delegates for this opportunity. Plastic is pollution. We are here with the ultimate and ambitious goal to end plastic pollution, and we can only achieve this through a legally binding global target on plastic production reduction. The science is clear. A new study for Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory reveals that deep primary production cuts are urgently needed for our planet to avoid breaching the 1.5-degree limit set by the Paris Agreement. At least 11.8% to 17.3% per year starting in 2024. We also have the numbers. 144 countries in their submissions across all INCs thus far have ambitiously put plastic production reduction on the table. We call on every member state in this room to deliver on their commitment to producing an ambitious, effective, just, and legally binding global instruments to end plastic pollution. We recommend the following priorities elements. 1. Reduce primary polymers production, substantially reduce global plastic production to protect human and environmental health, uphold human rights for now and the future, and respect planetary boundaries. Opt for a binding production phase down to sustainable levels with global targets levels and phase down schedules. 2. Develop an effective financial mechanism, a financial mechanism that includes a dedicated fund and ensures the provision of adequate, accessible, new, stable, and predictable and timely financial assistance on a grant basis for both enabling activities and for agreed incremental costs for compliance. 3. Ensure just transition. Apply a just transition lens across the full life cycle of plastics. Recognize the important role of waste pickers and workers in cooperative settings who divert more than 60% of waste from landfills. Lastly, we must focus our short time on the substances of the negotiations and ensure the rules of procedure contemplate voting as an enabler for consensus in decision-making. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to end plastic pollution once and for all. Our hopes lay with you. We thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the representative from the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, and now I give the floor to Break Free from Plastics Coalition, Mike 65. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Nina. I represent Break Free from Plastic Youth and River Warrior Indonesia. I'm 16 years old and I'm the youngest daughter of 2 Indonesian activists who taught me how to care my environment well. Our house is located along the Brantas River, East Java, Indonesia, a drinking water source for more than 5 million people. My family drinks and use water from this river. But unfortunately, the Brantas River has become a dumping ground for wastewater from paper recycling industries that mainly recycle imported paper waste from developed countries. But it was smuggled with dirty plastic waste. We found plastic waste with labels from Australia, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Korea, the Netherlands, and the USA. We collected trash over 3 years and discovered that plastic packaging, plastic bottles, and sachets are the biggest polluter of Brantas River. We found more than 4,000 microplastic particles in 100 liters of our river water. That's a lot compared to the microplastic in the water I sampled in Amstel River last year, only 60 particles in 100 liters of river water. Over the years, it has been proven that recycling does not work. Most plastic cannot be recycled and ends up in my river and being burned. Developed countries send their plastic burden to us, but we can't even manage our own waste. This is not fair. My community is being poisoned. Harmful chemicals in plastic threatens my health and future. Our future is being taken away from us. What kind of disaster are we waiting for? As adults who come to Ottawa to negotiate the plastic treaty, you must protect our rights to live in a healthy and safe environment. This problem needs to be addressed from the source. If the current plastic production continues, it will drown out other real solutions that need to be focused on in the treaty. The solution is to reduce plastic production drastically. We need the ambitious targets to ensure this reduction now. My generation sincerely hopes that you don't fail and disappoint us yet again this time. Thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished representative from Break Free from Plastics Coalition, and now I give the floor to the Society of Native Nations. Please, and that's microphone, mic 63.
Hello. Yep. Buju Ani Kanawea, Maskanwar Kwen Indigenous Makwendo Momjanang in Donjiba. My name is Janelle Namabin, also known as Red Cloud Woman. I'm from Omjanong First Nation on the outskirts of Sarnia, Ontario, here in Canada, commonly known as Chemical Valley. This is where 40% of Canada's petrochemicals come from. My small First Nation community is surrounded by over 60 petrochemical facilities. As a result, Omjanong's inherent rights, human rights, and the rights of nature have been sacrifice zone for industry for over 100 years. Last week, my community went into lockdown due to dangerously high benzene levels, and we're still in lockdown. Children sick, childcare, schools closed, or administration closed, people stayed indoors and they fear the air they're breathing inside their homes. Why? Because we're a stone throw away from a massive INEOS plant that uses and releases benzene to produce styrene, a chemical used to make one of the most commonly used plastics. Our concern isn't only this one facility, but there is several, over 60. Yesterday, our council declared a state of emergency due to another benzene leak in the community, and this would never be allowed in a city like Ottawa or Toronto. What I'm sharing is nothing new. In fact, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Health and Toxics visited my community when doing a tour of Canada. His report was issued in 2022, and for the sake of time, I please encourage you all to read it. With the United Nations rights of Indigenous people being adopted, it needs to be included in the plastic treaty because the people impacted by plastic pollution from extraction through pipelines to refineries to microplastics are the ones being impacted the most, mostly Indigenous people from around the world. It's worth mentioning that the environment I live in is a result of inadequate regulations, monitoring, and enforcement. Plastic pollution has been able to increase in my nation due to lack of regulations that would protect our rights and health from plastic pollution. We need stricter regulations that eliminate chemicals and polymers of concern with deadlines for outcomes that are enforced, and not in 100 years like the people of Aamjiwnaang First Nation have had to go through and continue to go through. Industry self-reporting isn't working. We need regulations that guarantee Aamjiwnaang and Indigenous people around the world a safe and healthy environment. We do not need another new plastic facility. What we need is binding cap on plastic production moving forward. And in the meantime, my community can't wait any longer for action. I'm calling on Canadian governments and the world to take immediate action to hold companies who are making us sick accountable. Chimiigwech.
I want to thank the representative from the Society of Native Nations, and now, y ahora doy la palabra a la...
I now give the floor to the Latin American and Caribbean Network for the Reduction of the Production of Plastics with Binding Global Targets, Mike 72.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I represent the Latin American Caribbean Network for the Reduction of the Production of Plastics with Binding Global Targets. We also represent or we align ourselves with other organizations. We welcome the fact that many countries throughout the world have expressed that they want to try to reduce the production of primary plastic polymers. Nevertheless, we are concerned that in our region we see the promotion of practices and technologies for waste management under the argument of the circular economy for plastics. This has led to serious impacts on the health of peoples and ecosystems. Therefore, in our network, we have a great concern with regards to the adoption of the term circular economy in the treaty, because in our region, this has been used to promote false solutions. By false solutions, we mean projects, technologies, or economic instruments which are presented as alternatives in order to provide a solution to plastic pollution. But these aren't really effective because they just act as distractions to the real solutions, or even worse, have negative effects which are even more harmful and aggravate plastic pollution. Some of the false solutions which are sold to us under the circular economy of plastics are as follows: chemical recycling, incineration, co-processing in cement kilns, and any other form of use in energy production, cross-border commerce of plastic waste, bioplastics, as well as plastic credits, plastic neutrality, amongst others, and technologies to clean and remove plastic waste from coastlines. All of these processes in our region exacerbate environmental injustice, violate human rights, and affect communities, waste pickers, workers, indigenous peoples, and shift economic costs, environmental costs, and healthcare costs to our countries. Therefore, we asked for support for binding global targets to reduce the production of plastics to no less than 70% of the basis of production in 2009 to 2030. We will ask for the exclusion of false solutions in methods to manage waste in the Plastics Treaty. Thank you. I thank the Latin American Caribbean Network for the Reduction of Plastic Products with binding global targets. And now give the floor to National Science Council.
And that's Mike 64.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. The International Science Council, comprised of over 250 national science academies, international disciplinary unions, and regional scientific organizations, would like to underscore the following points, many of which have already been made tonight. First, the instrument scope must align with the UNEP Resolution 514, covering the entire life cycle of plastics. This encompasses extraction, production, use, and disposal, including all types, sizes, and components of plastic. We do not recommend any categorical exemptions, which would lead to missed opportunities to reduce plastic use in key sectors. Health should be a priority in the negotiations. This entails adopting a hazard-based approach, working closely with scientists, and incorporating robust measures for monitoring, surveillance, and assessment to enable informed decision-making. This also involves applying the precautionary principle while awaiting further research. Third, addressing primary plastic production is needed to align with climate and sustainability goals as current levels exceed sustainability thresholds. Fourth, the instrument should include science-based criteria to determine safety and sustainability of plastics, to inform specific lists for elimination and restriction of chemicals and polymers of concern and of problematic and avoidable plastic products, and to determine safe and sustainable design. The ISC encourages continuing work to develop these sets of criteria as well as initial lists. Fifth, extending science-based safety and sustainability criteria to all alternative solutions, including bio-based, biodegradable, and compostable plastics, will be key. Sixth, implementing globally harmonized requirements for transparency, traceability of chemical information, and labeling standards will and can facilitate the transition to a toxic-free circular economy. This involves the development of reliable methods for monitoring and tracking plastic waste at all levels. This will be crucial for preventing new accumulation in the environment. 7, incorporating robust just transition measures is key. Financial support for innovation and capacity building, especially in low-income countries and small island developing states, is crucial. Finally, successful implementation of commitments to end plastic pollution will hinge on sustained engagement of science and the establishment of a robust science policy interface. This is an area that can benefit from dedicated work following INC-4. The International Science Council stands ready to convene SPI experts, science policy integration experts, to further advance the thinking around the scientific subsidiary body. Additionally, we strongly encourage finalizing a mandate for post-INC-4 intercessional work for further development of the instrument's text, with formal platforms for consultation with the wider scientific and knowledge community. The ISC stands ready to leverage its scientific knowledge, expertise, and regional networks to support the development of an effective instrument and a robust science policy interface to curtail plastic pollution. Thank you very much.
I thank you. Thank you to the International Science Council. Now I give the floor to the Inuit Circumpolar Council.
Okay.
That's microphone, mic 84.
Thank you, Chair. ICC thanks members for the work in streamlining treaty text and for the movement forward. We support International Alliance of Waste Pickers and the Society of Native Nations for their interventions. Inuit Circumpolar Council represents Inuit who live in 4 Arctic countries. We live along Arctic coastlines, and our culture and livelihoods are founded on our link, the inextricable link to the marine ecosystem. Inuit Circumpolar Council calls on parties to ensure the preamble text recognizes the Arctic as a vulnerable and sensitive region, as it is stated in both the Minamata and Stockholm Conventions, as well as the rights of Indigenous peoples. This is vital as our Arctic environment continues to change at an unprecedented rate. Further, in the principles and the operative text, ICC urges parties to include a direct reference to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In line with this, any references to Indigenous peoples or the knowledge of Indigenous peoples cannot be conflated with the term local communities or local knowledge. Our rights and our Indigenous knowledge are distinct and must be recognized as such. When the text acknowledges human health and the environment, it needs to include the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. This does not create new obligations, but adds continuity, clarity, and alignment with the existing human rights framework. Finally, ICC would like to highlight the role of observers, and specifically Indigenous peoples, in these negotiations. Indigenous peoples are rights holders, not stakeholders, and the lack of space for our direct engagement in these spaces violates UNDRIP Article 41, and ultimately will lead to a treaty that creates more issues rather than solving them. I look forward to the opportunity to engage directly in the following days and into INC-5. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you to the ICC. Thank you to the ICC. Now I will take the last statement, that it will be from the Endocrine Society, Mic 47. The Endocrine Society, thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. The Endocrine Society represents the world's largest and oldest professional society dedicated to the understanding of hormone systems and clinical care of those with endocrine diseases. Our members' expertise has advanced our understanding of how chemicals in plastics can act as endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs, and cause human and environmental health impacts. From the beginning of this process, we have engaged with the INC to share our insights with members about the well-established scientific evidence linking chemicals in plastics to diseases such as obesity, diabetes, infertility, and cancer. And we have highlighted the extraordinary economic costs of exposure to these chemicals, on the order of $250 billion per year in the US alone. We urge delegates to act with urgency during this meeting and in the intersessional period to make progress towards a treaty that emphasizes the importance of both human and environmental health in the objective and throughout the instrument, recognizes the need for actions to limit plastic production, incorporates measures to minimize exposure to chemicals of concern, recognizing that of concern may refer to a chemical's hazardous properties, includes scientists with relevant expertise free from conflicts of interest in the monitoring and evaluation of the treaty. Finally, as medical and scientific professionals, we urge the committees not to implement broad exemptions for any sector, including fields of medicine and science. We welcome discussions around an essential use concept and align ourselves with the Science Coalition in this context. We want to be active partners with you towards reducing human and environmental impacts of plastic pollution throughout the life cycle. Thank you for your attention. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. And I thank you for your informative statements. And dear colleagues, dear friends, this now brings us to the conclusion of our meeting today. So thank you very much, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.